Urban legends. Odds are you've heard a few over the years. They're often creepy or scary and involve some sort of monster, criminal, or unexplainable phenomenon. As we get older, we laugh them off because they're all made up. Or are they? We've gathered a range of popular urban legends that shockingly turned out to be based on reality. The monster in the woods, the creatures in the sewer, and the thieves who steal your organs all have strong elements of truth to them. Keep those lights on and don't plan on going to bed anytime soon, because some of these can send a chill up your spine. Before we scare you too much, just remember to subscribe, like, and comment. Who knows, you may find your comment featured in our viewer shoutout. Pirates of the Caribbean. The urban legend. Starting this one off is a very familiar, family-friendly locale. Let's head over to Disneyland. One of this park's iconic rides is the Pirates of the Caribbean. As visitors ride past the fun scenes, it's hard not to notice the bones used as props. For years, the legend persisted that those bones were actual human remains, maybe even taken from a local medical school. The truth. When the ride first opened in the 1960s, quite a few of the bones were actual human remains. In fact, rumor has it they were sourced from the UCLA Medical School. As far as experts and former staff can verify, today there is at least one skull in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride that is 100% human. Which one is it? Everyone is pretty sure it's the skull over the bed. Rumors have it that there may be a couple other bones sitting around, but nothing is verified. What we do know is that pretty much everything else was swapped out for fake bones, because they keep longer and are a little less creepy. The Atomic Wedgie. The urban legend. If you were unfortunate enough to endure a rough childhood filled with bullies or an older sibling, then odds are you experienced a wedgie. That's where someone grabs your underwear, waistband, and lifts upward. The end result is rather uncomfortable and embarrassing. Then there was the Atomic Wedgie. This was when someone performed such a brutal wedgie that the waistband could be wrapped over your head. Urban legend had it that some children who experienced an atomic wedgie passed away from the extreme pain. Surely, this wasn't true. The truth. There is at least one high-profile instance of someone passing away after sustaining an atomic wedgie. In Oklahoma in 2013, Brad Davis got into a fight with his stepfather, Denver Lee St. Clair. Davis says he had been bullied by St. Clair his entire life, so he decided to settle the score. A heated war of words turned into a physical altercation. Before St. Clair knew what happened, his underwear was pulled up and wrapped over his head. Unfortunately, this potentially funny moment turned tragic when the waistband of the underwear strangled St. Clair, ending his life. Buried alive. The urban legend. Believe it or not, more than a few people are terrified of potentially being buried alive. The story goes that even hundreds of years ago, coffins were dug up filled with scratch marks of people who had been shoved into their final resting place a little too early. We guess that reveals just how terrible the medical profession was back then. Regardless, even today, people seem to be spreading stories that it's possible for you to be buried alive after everyone else thinks you passed on. With our level of medical expertise, how could this be possible? The truth. First off, it's true that in the old days, people were terrified of being buried alive. In fact, some coffins were even designed to be linked to a bell that would ring. The bell would notify graveyard staff that a person, or zombie, was alive in the coffin 6 feet below. Today, as disturbing as it is, there are still cases of people actually being buried alive. Whether it was because their vital signs were really low, or the doctors were just really bad at their jobs, it happens more than you know. The baby monitor. The urban legend. In the era of surveillance and Wi-Fi everything, it's no surprise that even the old-fashioned baby monitor has given way to high-tech video and audio systems. Parents can see and hear their child no matter where they are, yet so can strangers. At least, that's where the urban legend comes into play. You've likely heard stories of parents hearing voices coming from their baby's bedroom. Upon entering, they discover the baby monitor has been hacked and some weirdo is watching or talking to their child. But does this really happen? The truth? You bet it does. In London, Ontario, one couple endured a rather terrifying run-in with a possessed baby monitor. Okay, it wasn't possessed, but it might as well have been. When one of the parents was with the baby in the bedroom, they said the camera turned on remotely. After this, strange music and a person telling them they were being watched could be heard. Finally, when both parents entered the room to check this out, the camera, on its own, swiveled to look at the parents. Yikes. Alright, let's lighten the mood with the viewer shout-out. Today, it's Yori Sanchez, who wrote, "Woo! I love learning!" Thank you, The Richest, for your amazing and entertaining videos. You are so welcome, Yori. And thank you for the awesome comment, because we love hearing positive feedback. The creatures in the sewer. The urban legend. In the sewers below our cities live an assortment of creatures and monsters. This one has fueled all sorts of storylines. From the Phantom of the Opera to the 80s TV version of The Beauty and the Beast, even South Park made the sewer home for their lovable Mr. Hanky. In real life, however, every now and then a worker comes back with stories of strange sounds or a sighting that can't be explained. The truth? We're pretty sure no musically talented individuals or Disney-like characters call the sewer their home. However, there have been a number of very real sightings. In New York, for instance, stories of an alligator have occurred since the 30s. In 2010, the NYPD actually caught a 2-foot baby alligator. Over in Paris, a Nile crocodile was caught in the underground system and sent to a zoo in the western part of the country. Head bugs. The urban legend. This one is pretty straightforward. When you were little, you or your friends likely had stories about someone who had a bug crawl in their ear. From there, things turned into a full-on Wes Craven horror flick as the bug multiplied and ate away at the host. There's no way that's true, right? The truth. Better get some earplugs. After a trip to Peru, Rochelle Harris started experiencing pain in her face, and she could also hear scratching sounds inside her head. A trip to the doctor revealed the horrible truth. Somehow a blowfly had entered her ear and laid eggs. The eggs had hatched, and the pain and noise Harris was experiencing was being caused by the maggots eating their surroundings. Fortunately, the doctor was able to remove the pesky little visitors, and Harris could go back to her life. As for us, well, we're questioning our next vacation destination. The boogeyman. The urban legend. This one has been around forever. For generations, little kids have been left terrified by the boogeyman. Depending on where you live, this mythical being can take on the form of an old hag, a demon, or just some creepy old man. All of them are said to be responsible for coming and taking away children who are misbehaving. The truth. My mommy always said there were no monsters, no real ones, but there are, aren't there? Yes, indeed. Take the case of Cropsy, the Staten Island boogeyman. Cropsy is a fictitious character who is said to live near an old rundown sanatorium. From there, he would nab little children and take them back to his dwelling. Well, in the 1970s and 80s, Andre Rand, a former janitor in the area, became a real-life Cropsy. Living in the forest near the hospital, Rand had a rather dark history when it came to children. So when 4 kids went missing, everyone immediately linked it to him. He is currently in prison for these crimes. Inside the house. The urban legend. This one is so popular, it's even been used in movies. The story goes that a girl is home alone, and while she can ignore the creaking of the old house's floorboards, it's a phone call that really turns this into a horror movie. You see, on the other end of the line is a mysterious voice that scares the girl. When she calls to report it, they tell her the call was coming from within the home. The truth. While the thought of some Hollywood-style criminal calling us from within our own home is terrifying, many of us would laugh it off. Yet this one can and has happened. Sort of. An unnamed 16-year-old British girl had been receiving stalker-like messages from a man named Kyle Ravenscroft. One night, Kyle sent the girl a text saying he was inside her house watching her. As a precaution, the girl slept in her mother's room. The next morning, she returned to a bedroom, but felt a sensation of being watched. After looking around, she found Ravenscroft hiding under her bed. Like the girl, the police were not amused. The secret roommate. The urban legend? Speaking of people being in your house uninvited, this urban legend has gained serious traction over the past few years. Depending on who told you or where you heard it, the gist is usually the same. A person in a house or apartment hears strange things at night, but never notices it during the daytime. Then they start noticing food and clothing going missing. A quick check reveals a hidden door or a loose ventilation grate. One thing leads to another, and they discover a mysterious person has been living in their home for some time. The truth. Yup, you guessed it by now, this sort of thing is no urban legend. In Tokyo, Japan, a man who lived on his own discovered a homeless woman living in his cupboard. She had been there for a year. Over in Washington, Davis Wallman had heard noises in the attic, but knew someone was living in his house when an interior door was mysteriously locked. A quick call to the police solved both of those problems. The organ thief. The urban legend. This one usually involves someone who is at a party or some sort of social event. They are having a good time, hanging out with friends and strangers. The next thing they know, they wake up the next morning in a bathtub filled with ice. In addition to being woozy and cold, they realize they have a bad pain in their side. Upon closer inspection, they realize they have an incision and someone has taken their kidney. Thus, the urban legend of the organ thief. Over the past couple decades, this story has persisted and doesn't show signs of letting up. The truth. This one is based on real-life events. While the story of the partygoer knocked out and operated on might be off, organ thieves are real. For instance, in India, one group of men were promised work if they showed up to a certain location. When they showed up, they were all taken prisoner. Over a series of days, the men were knocked out and all awoke in operating rooms after their kidneys were removed. It turns out there really is a thriving black market for body parts.